What is the silliest reason you've seen someone get offended? When I worked at Walt Disney World, we had buttons that we would give out to guests who were celebrating a special day or event in the parks. Things like first visits, anniversaries, birthdays, honeymoons, and so on. The purpose of the buttons was to give the employees, cast members and a sneak peek, an opening to engage the guests. If you saw a couple with anniversary buttons, for example, you could wish them a happy anniversary. Well, one of our greeters saw a little boy and his father walking towards an attraction, and noticed the boy was wearing a button that said happy birthday and had his name written underneath it. So she smiled and said, "Happy birthday, Bobby." The father proceeded to get up in her face, screaming, "How dare you talk to my child? You have no reason to talk to him. If you have anything to say to him, you go through him." He reduced her to tears. I really felt sorry for that kid. Remember people, just because the employee being reamed can't talk back doesn't mean you can't tell people they're being buttholes. I used to work in an Outback steakhouse in suburb of Atlanta. A couple came in and was seated in a booth. Before their server could even take their drink order, I noticed them angrily walking to the door. I asked if something was wrong and they replied, "We refuse to eat in a restaurant with a rebel flag on the wall." It was an Australian flag. Little do you know, they just really hate those rebellious fricking Australians. Goddamn bogans. My downhill neighbors took down the fence separating our yards because they said our yard was so beautiful. Then they complained that we were spying on them from our deck. Then we built a fence separating the yards again so we both had our privacy. Then they built a raised deck to see over the fence to our yard and complained again that we were spying on them. Great plan to get you to pay for a new fence. Now they want it higher. Masterminds. I saw a girl go on a Facebook rant one time condemning a cookie delivery company because they gave her an extra cookie and wrote a note saying figured you would appreciate an extra cookie. She went on talking about how she had body issues and this guy company should send her a written apology because of how they were calling her fat or something. The best part is the company responded and offered her a free box of 6 of her favorite cookies. She accepted. I hope they only sent 5. I worked in a store that sells miniature historical figures. Our window display was a large recreation of the Battle of Waterloo, maybe 6 feet by 3. We had a woman come in one day and scream at the top of her lungs because one of the figures was holding a tiny Union Jack. So in short, a woman was offended by our tiny historically accurate flag of the United Kingdom. Friends with an allergy mom on Facebook. She takes it as a personal insult if you mention liking or consuming peanut products. I live across the country from her, but my peanut butter and jelly sandwich could kill her son, so I shouldn't eat it. I bought the Reese's candy variety pack to hand out on Halloween. It's worth noting that I also had non-food items and was participating in the Teal Pumpkin Project. But the fact that I was handing out candy with peanut butter in it was an attack on her and her child. As a child I considered any Halloween candy that wasn't Reese's a personal attack. I work as customer service in a retail store. We had a single long line on the right side of the desk. Has 3 registers in it for returns. A woman who just came in went to the left side and straight to one of the registers. When told that she needs to get into line, she becomes furious and started screaming, asking why she has to fall in line. "Yes, I am one of those people," she shouted when she saw a co-worker roll her eyes. It was causing a scene, so a manager took over and we all looked apologetically at the other people in line. I could fill this whole thread with my mother, but here are 2 examples from recent memory. She cooks potatoes for dinner. I put salt on them. She screams for 2 hours about how rude I am to insinuate her cooking isn't good enough. I'm using the single cup coffee maker at my cousin's house. My cousin makes an offhand remark about how she needs to replace the filter because it's overdue. I laugh and say that we have to do the same, and we forget about the filter often. Cue mother screaming about how I embarrassed her in front of her family. I think your mother has problems. I was in line at a donut shop where the woman ahead of me got sorely offended with the guy in front of her because he took the last cinnamon donut in the display case, the very one she had her eyes fixed on for breakfast. She actually asked if he'd let her have it in exchange for 2 others she would buy of a different variety. When he said no, she just stormed out of the shop, glaring at him. Some people never grow up. Honestly, if someone takes the last of something in a shop, just get over it and move on. Once when I was working as a barista, this older guy got really upset that I was wearing a ring on my left ring finger cause I wasn't married. I looked at him ranting and me and said, well, I am married, so. The kind of old man who would get super mad at an unmarried woman wearing a ring on her left hand is the kind of old man who thinks it is automatic that a woman is unmarried if he can see that she has a job. A few of us were having a friendly chat with a neighbor. The topic of Tom Brady and Giselle came up and the neighbor says she's only with him for his money. We point out that she makes considerably more than he does. The neighbor flips out and says we are all ganging up on her and storms off. Received a complaint from an anonymous co-worker. Let's be honest, we all know who it is in every workplace, that I had used the outdated and racist term of collard greens to describe what my grandma made for Thanksgiving. Apparently, I was saying that because it's popular with colored people in the South, never mind it's because they come from the collard family of cabbages. So I was forced to apologize and call it spinach, which it is freaking not. Goddamn you Lois for making me spread misinformation. I work at a casino and a woman came up to the security guest yelling about how she was being discriminated against for having pink hair. It's a hard rock casino. We don't care about your hair. Because people kept stopping her asking to see her ID, and she had to be escorted out every time because she doesn't have any of the 5 valid forms that we take. It's the law to have your ID on you when you enter the casino. There's a sign at every entrance and exit. Stop being stupid. Stop being stupid. Sorry, never going to happen. Told her that her kids would be seated at the kids' table, and she freaked out that they were family members of the groom and shouldn't be shunned. So we immediately said we'd change the seating plan so they could sit with her, to which she got even more offended because she didn't want to spend the reception with a bunch of children and demanded she be with adults only. I worked with a guy that got offended I parked in a handicap spot that I was legally allowed to use. I spend most of my time in a wheelchair. Though a few years ago, even when I first started needing my chair, I was able to walk short distances fine. But anything that was beyond a certain point I was in danger of falling because I couldn't support myself that long. So I could drive to work okay. I could get out of my car and pull out my chair and get in. I could even leave my chair in my office to go to the bathroom about 10 feet away. So this guy started working for the same company and things are going fine. I don't know if he didn't notice me in my wheelchair at my desk instead of a normal office chair, or if he just hadn't seen me make one of my many trips down the hall to my boss in my chair, or what. He didn't work in my department, so I didn't really pay much attention. He was leaving one day at the same time I was and saw me stand out of my chair to put it in my car. He started screaming at me about how I was taking advantage of both the company, the parking space, and everyone who is really disabled. I mean 5 minutes of a tirade while I am holding on to my car for dear life because he is preventing me from putting my folded chair into my trunk. I got a whole spiel about how his mom can't walk and every time she goes to park at a handicap spot some butthole like me is parked there, and how dare I take away parking spots from people who really can't get around. A coworker came out, heard the yelling and called for security. Needless to say, after a 10-minute meeting with my boss, his boss, their boss and HR, he was fired. Seriously, the guy got angry and offended because my disability seemed fake to him because I could stand up for moments at a time. Every now and then I think I should have sent him my medical bills to prove how real my condition is, but I was shocked silent at the time and trying not to fall. My 70-plus-year-old mom needs a wheelchair. My 70-plus-year-old dad drives her. He pulls into handicapped spaces and gets all sorts of jeers and insults as he is clearly able-bodied and able to walk just fine. They usually shut up when he opens the trunk and pulls out the wheelchair. People are idiots. My girlfriend's mom gets offended if you try to disagree with her in front of other people. She will pull you aside later and try to get you to apologize for embarrassing her so badly. My mom still does that. If my voice so much as fluctuates to an argumentative tone, suddenly I'm yelling at her in public. Luckily my sister and I both recognize it now, so when we're together we can stick up for each other and call her on it. My sister was freaking out about Ebola. I told her that the CDC is packed with highly trained people who have determined we don't have to worry. She said she'd read some articles online and that they were wrong. I told her it took more than reading a few articles to become an epidemiologist. She flipped the frick out and told me my opinion didn't count because I haven't graduated college yet. My public speaking professor told our class this story at the beginning of the semester as a sample speech. He told us because the teacher in the story recently won her second Teacher of the Year award from the state. A college professor of American literature was teaching her class about backstory and exposition using the chapter in The Great Gatsby where Gatsby describes the story of how he became Jay Gatsby and wealthy. Just the one chapter, and the students didn't even have to read the whole book. The following Monday, she shows up to her office in the morning and finds several students outside of her office with a petition signed by them and written in text message lingo, "You for you," etc. for her to resign from her job for making them read a chapter from The Great Gatsby that filled them with envy for the wealth of this fictional character and caused them mental stress. The woman took the petition and told them she would consider it. At the start of class, the teacher returned the paper to the students who wrote it with all of the grammar and punctuation corrected in red pen. The teacher returned the paper to the students who wrote it with all of the grammar and punctuation corrected in red pen. I really enjoy this teacher's style. I get people offended all the time. I mighty support. Apparently it offends people when you ask them to open a ticket, or when you come to help them. Frick this. They get offended when you close a ticket after a week goes by of them not answering your replies. That's always my favorite. I said a lot of Italian operas were about sex and murder, so he called me racist. 1. It's true, and wasn't even a negative comment. 2. I am Italian. Dude in a restaurant called me Hitler because I made a Holocaust joke to my friends. My grandma is a Holocaust survivor and she told me that joke. I once told my friend he should be humble about getting a DUI. He was blackout drunk and got a DUI for it. He fought it in court and said his lawyer was awful and he shouldn't have to get a DUI. I went up to him and I said, "But dude, you were drinking and driving." And he got offended and said, "So fricking what? You think that's going to stop me from drinking? These fricking counseling classes I have to take are a fricking waste of time." I was on a ferry with my very cute lap dog. A woman approached me and asked to pet my dog. I told her no, that the dog would bite her if she tried. She reached out to pet the dog anyway and the dog snapped at her. Didn't actually bite but made it clear not to come any closer. She got mad because all dogs love me. This actually happened twice with two separate women in the same ferry ride. It was probably the same woman in a disguise attempting some sort of sitcom-like plan to finally get to pet your dog. In a certain community I'm a part of, there was an Italian guy who was particularly good at what he did, so he got sponsored by a primarily American team. Well, one day, a girl online called him a giraffe and he freaked out as if the girl dropped the most racist, ignorant, offensive comment ever. He ended up threatening to kill her. He also hoped that the girl would get raped to death if she didn't take it back. Well, she leaked the messages to the community that he's a part of, to which he responded back to her with, "If I lose my sponsorship because of her, I swear to God I'm going to fly to America and kill this bee." He ended up losing his sponsorship and giraffe memes became the highlight of the community for a few days until the moderators had to make them a bannable offense. Good times. Everyone knows it's okay to threaten to kill people and wish gang rape upon them, but you cannot under any circumstances use the G word. My friend gets pee off whenever Netflix asks, "Are you still watching?" stating it's none of their goddamn business if I am still watching. I pay my money. What you are watching is literally their business. There was a tradition at my university where the senior student mentors in one faculty would grow beards all summer, then most would shave after fresh orientation. That was banned because it might be offensive to some religions. Was on a plane from Denver to Baltimore. They get everyone in the tunnel to board the plane. Then a situation happens. No one knows what. But there's managers, attendants, pilots, everything. Then an air marshal comes. And I'm like, fuck me. Thinking the worst. So 45 minutes go by and we're now on the plane but delayed and sitting there. Turns out 3 young girls stole $200 from an old woman who had her purse on her seat while she was getting her luggage situated. The woman eventually had to notify the attendants because the situation was escalating. The main girl who was being accused stands up and makes a scene. They escort her off the plane and talk to her. She's screaming, "Y'all better be getting me back on this motherfucking plane. This is profiling." They call a few people who saw it. The marshal had come to talk to her, to which she sprinted back onto the plane and into the bathroom, and they had to take the door apart to get to her. This was the 45 minutes. They check the trash can. $200 is in it. I don't know why she didn't at least flush it instead, but they arrest her and her 2 friends that helped. All while the girl is screaming how this is racist and this is profiling, and she's suing and they better get her on a first class trip right now. TL Doctor. Thief was offended for being accused of stealing because they thought it was because of their skin color. Turns out, they were actually just a thief. They check the trash can. $200 is in it. I don't know why she didn't at least flush it instead. This is just a guess, but I think the way it played out in her mind was they were going to let her go with an apology and maybe an upgrade to first class when they couldn't find the money. Then she was going to go back to the bathroom and take the money out of the trash. Friend posts on FB saying it's ironic that she's discussing sex education across the room from someone reading a Bible. I comment saying not all religious people are against sex ed. Friend says she has been publicly humiliated and devotes several therapy sessions to this incident. We are no longer friends. If I devoted even one therapy session to this, I think my therapist would literally smack me across the face. The silliest? I've been 5. Probably my sisters and I fighting over windows in the car. Mom, she's looking out my window was stated on more than one occasion. My favorite was when my youngest sister told my parents that I'd called her a tattletale. She had no idea what it meant but was pretty sure it was something she could get me in trouble over. Aha, stupid car ride fights between me and my brother were the bane of my parents' existence when we were younger. He started crying once when I leaned over and pushed his window button on my mom's request. When I was in 4th grade, I was horsing around during some class free time. I had a coat hanger in my sweater with the hook poking out from my sleeve. I was doing the whole pirate eye thing and I say near the new girl, "Gar, I'm Captain Hook." She freaks out and demands I tell her why I just called her a H. I didn't even know what a H is and told her so. Apparently, that wasn't the right answer. Teacher got involved, explained myself and apologized for the misunderstanding. Girl hated me after that. What kind of parents are teaching their 4th grader what a H is? My last date got offended at me for making too much eye contact. Could you please not look at me when I'm checking my texts? It only exacerbated the issue when I answered, "Could you please not be so rude as to check them at dinner?" I was shopping with my kids and wife for school supplies at Staples when an older grandmother-aged woman walks up to me and sticks an advertisement in my face and aggressively asks, "Where are these?" pointing to some 3-ring binders. I step back and say, "I'm sorry, but I don't work here." She mutters back, "How rude," and several other things under her breath. At which point I respond with, "What exactly do you expect me to do? Do you expect me drop?" At which point my wife interrupts my tirade with, "Honey, you can't fix stupid," at which point my wife and I both started laughing. The old lady left in a huff and returned a few minutes later with the manager at the end of the aisle we were in and pointing at us. Something tells me we're probably on a warning list Staples at this point. I hope you don't get fired from a job you don't have. Almost anything my sister does. Right now she's offended that my mum didn't buy herself the car my sister thought she should buy. At school we had a black supply teacher. I asked one of my classmates what her name was, but they didn't know who I was referring to, so I said the nice black lady. The class went into freaking uproar and I was that racist kid for the entire time there. Sent them an email for an invitation to participate in my research project. They sent a complaint to uni ethics committee. Ex-girlfriend started talking to me after 2+ years of no contact. I was surprised, but whatever. 4 weeks later she explains that she's going on holiday for her birthday to Disney World. I say cool and wish her a good time. She talks to me every now and again throughout that holiday, sending pictures, this and that. I never asked for any of this, but didn't want to appear rude. Threw in small talk here and there. One day, which happened to be her final day there, I had been out all day and been to bed early. She messages me, "No time to talk to me today then?" Oh, I went to bed early and then I've been out at the gym all day. LOL. Is something funny? I take the time to talk to you while on vacation and you're laughing at me. You're still a dong. I blocked her shortly after and not spoke to her since. Crazy people, man. They're everywhere. Was at the grocery store where a woman was blocking the aisle with her cart while she scanned the shelves. I said, "Excuse me," in a soft voice, figuring she didn't realize her cart was in the way. This usually works. She didn't react, so I figured she just hadn't heard me, so I said it again a little louder, regular speaking volume. She still didn't react, so I said it again louder, still not shouting at all, but making sure she could hear me. "Excuse me, I'm trying to get through." She turns to me and says, "How rude," at which point I just grabbed the end of her cart and moved it out of the middle of the aisle and said, "No, what's rude is blocking the aisle." I was being polite. "You're being rude," and I just went about my shopping. Some people are very oblivious. At least you tried to communicate. My grandma does not ask for permission, she instead rams the cart out of the way, Mad Max style. So when me and my brother witnessed it after hearing about it from my aunt, we were laughing our asses off, and the lady just turned quickly to be able to see her cart on the side and didn't do anything. My dad always used to get so pee when I called my mom by the pronoun she. He'd say "Sh's not a she, sh's your mother." But I was too scared to tell him he was calling her she also in that statement, because I used the word intuitive in casual conversation. We were classmates and we were on good terms. On the day in question, the teacher for a modern history course had brought in this guy who was a reporter and economist who taught economy at uni, to give us a lecture on the various issues with capitalism. Afterwards, me and this guy were going down the stairs from the classroom, and we both agreed that it had been a good lecture. I then added that I found some parts pretty difficult because they hinged on concepts that I didn't find to be intuitive. Apparently, my classmate did not know this word, and he quickly and politely informed me that I shouldn't use it because it was elitist to do so. Things devolved into him demanding an apology from me for having used a word he doesn't understand, and me telling him that I won't apologize for his stupidity. A good friend of mine, whom we'll call Mary, expresses an inappropriate amount of anger towards anyone who uses the phrase rule of thumb. Most people don't know what it means, and it's little more than a colloquialism. Mary makes sure to angrily chastise people for using the term. Don't you know what rule of thumb means? It used to mean a man could beat a woman with a stick no bigger than his thumb. You shouldn't go around saying things like that. It's so rude. I've seen her do this several times, and it just embarrasses or flusters people. They don't mean it that way, but a melodramatic history lesson helps no one. I was the team leader of volunteers at a conference, and I was at the registration desk. A woman came to sign in and pick up her badge and schedule, etc., and asked one of the volunteers a question. The volunteer didn't know the answer, so she looked at me and I gave the response. The lady flipped about how I was imposing myself and disrespecting the volunteer and ranting about how that's what men do, all because I was male and answered a question that was initially directed to a woman, despite said woman turning to me for the answer. Eventually she moved on, but I was told later by the volunteer, who was a good friend of mine, that the lady tracked her down to rant some more about how I walked all over her and she shouldn't let me do that, and women need to put men like me in my place. It was surreal. She also interrupted a conference speaker for not addressing some pet cause of hers not at all related to his topic, and she got in an argument with a Jewish attendee who disagreed with her, so she said he was worse than Hitler. A girl in 9th grade asked me how I was so skinny, and I shrugged and said I didn't know. I just ate when I was hungry and stopped when I was full, and that apparently translated to me calling her a fat bee somehow. I told someone that I felt like tokenistic. From my experience as someone of mixed ethnicity, was aggressively told I couldn't feel that way, and that only certain types of mixed people are entitled to that view. Your ethnicity has been determined by the collective to be incompatible with the consensus. It was a beautiful and unseasonably warm fall day on my college campus, high near 90 and humid. As I was walking towards the library, I saw one of my former professors, interpersonal communications, walking towards me. She was wearing corduroy pants and a thick sweater with a scarf. I said, "Afternoon, Dr. Robinson." "Oh my gosh, it's way too warm a day for that sweater." I was planning on following up by asking if she had a cold classroom, but she got right in my space and shook her finger in my face and snapped, "You have no right to tell me what I can and cannot wear. It is not your place to decide my clothing." I mumbled something incoherent and skulked away. I love how you clarified that she taught you interpersonal communications, haha. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.